Good morning, dear friends. Welcome. Today is Tuesday, March 19th, the 9th of Adar 2. It's no ordinary day. It's an emotional day, a special day for our Talmud Chabura, which is dedicated to studying the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. And today, before we launch into the Gemara, today's a special day, as it is the Shloshim, 30 days since our dear Dr. Pasternak, and Shloshim is always a special day and a meaningful day and an emotional day. And so certainly the family, of course, has the monopoly on the deepest feelings and emotion. But as a chabura, as a group who were privileged day in and day out to spend time with Dr. Pasternak and Yibad L'chaim Tovim, our dear Mrs. Pasternak, it's a kavod that we could mark the Shloshim. And so what I propose to do, and what we'll do to learn to begin, is we'll learn some Mishnayos that's connected to our Gemara topic, as is known that there's a common tradition to study in the different benchmarks of commemorating and continuing our journey of remembering and loving and holding on to those that are departed. We study Mishnah. And of course, we were privileged to have an in-person memorial breakfast on Sunday with the wonderful Pasternak family and friends. And we noted that Mishnayos, so again, I know many people studied Mishnayos, and I suppose somewhere that there's perhaps a siyum, but we, in our own way, as a chabura who had an ongoing connection, will study some Mishnayos in conjunction with a broader effort. And I want to note, I shared this on Sunday, that Mishnayos is selected, number one, because it is the same letters as Neshama. Mishnah Oisei is Neshama. And so there's something mystically connected with the study of Mishnayos and Neshama. My proposed theory about, in a more practical sense, is that Mishnah represents the oral tradition that was passed down through the generations, from one generation to the other until it was transcribed, and it represents yet the oral tradition. Of course, every one of us serve to be part of a link where we've received certain gifts from those before us, and we pass them on to those that follow. And so at a Shloshim or at a Shiva, when we remember someone that did so much to convey love and values and Torah and so much more to us and to the future generations, a Mishnah very much embodies that idea of taking those values, taking those teachings, and passing it forth. And of course, someone who day in and day out was committed to learning, it's only appropriate, it's only right that we would have the opportunity to memorialize and honor the Shloshim here, in addition to any other efforts and projects that are doing so. This is a Talmud Chabura, so I want to explain, and those that maybe that have listened in, it's not so formal, and it's not exclusively one person presenting. So certainly, before we start learning a few Mishnah, if anyone wants to chime in with any comments, perhaps that would be the appropriate way to start, and then I'll share the screen. This is the format of our group anyways. So perhaps what I'll do before we share the screen and study some Mishnah is we'll do a slight open mic if anybody wants to chime in. There's no pressure, but either members of the Chabura or family, this is, we'll open the floor and then we will share.
What's up?
Did Yami come in?
Yes, okay.
Dr. Hammer?
We went to
Yeah, okay, I'm in the middle of the okay.
everything else.
Yes.
All right, so if anyone, again, there's no pressure, but if anybody wanted to jump in, you're welcome to do so. And I do also want to, I want to give a special tribute or shout out to our dear Mrs. Pasternak, who is an equal partner in the Talmud venture, and on many times, or behind the screen or in front of the screen. And we're privileged to see you today and to have you with us. And it means a lot that you allowed us to have that day in and day out connection.
Thank you. I'm privileged to be here. You're doing a wonderful, wonderful mitzvah.
Thank you.
And Irwin enjoyed it immensely.
So let me. So until someone cuts me off, and I want to invite someone to cut me off, so I'm just gonna Here, go ahead. At the breakfast, so we shared something that read from the Talmud, from Pesachim actually, that states, well, the part that I cut out is Shamati Shahayu Amrim. The Gemara says we heard it said by the angels in heaven, Ashrei mi shabalakan v'talmudai biyadai, blessed or lucky or praiseworthy is the individual who arrives on high after 120, and they have a portfolio of Gemara with them, obviously describing a person who takes the time to study. And the beauty of this chabura is that it's diverse, and so we have different degrees of background in Talmud study, ranging from day school, yeshiva, to self-taught. And one of the beauties of this chabura, and I think one of the things that I really admire about Dr. Pasternak, is my understanding is he didn't have the opportunity to have an exhaustive childhood education, but he didn't let that deter him, and he made Torah study a priority and accumulating and acquiring that knowledge. And so when I think of him in the context of our study, I can't but help think of that passage in the Gemara. By the way, in today's Tanya, there's a similar idea. It says that the greatest profound reward that's afforded a person in Shamayim is able to be received and accepted because the soul has also the gift of Torah. And so Torah becomes, or gives an added ability for the neshama to enjoy and to have that reward that is in Olam Haba. And so certainly an appropriate idea.
Rabbi,
Yes, Rebero.
so for those of us who are privileged enough to interact with Dr. Pasternak, we have to be thankful for. The way I see it, we've lost the future, but we have not lost the past, and that's forever with us. So thank you for the privilege of being in his company.
Yeah. Concurred. If anyone else wanted to jump in before I share the screen, you're more than welcome to do so. And I'm going to locate the Mishnah that I intend to begin with. So bear with me. Here we go.
Rabbi,
Doctor, yes, please.
so I'm looking at the screen, and unfortunately I was unable to be at the activities for a few days. The weather being better. I look at the screen and I think of Reb Irwin, and I look at the people who are part of the Chavura. So obviously it started over 3 years ago. On yeshiva night, the rabbi started learning, and there were only one or two people involved in at the time. And Mark, I think I was the next person, and we sit in the corner and learn. And then it was suggested that we try to branch out. Okay, and from the time that we moved into the community, the Pasternaks were the ones in La Mer and in the shul who reached out and were makarev us in the best of ways. And it's not that we had so much in common in terms of caring for or all those things. So Irwin and I learned extremely well, and we felt very much needed because we were the only two Levium coming to shul on a regular basis. So he became known as the senior Levi. I became the junior Levi. We would rotate. But when the Chabura started to take its development, I look and I see at least 4 of the people who are here now, and I could add a 5th. Our dear Dr. Menachem from Teaneck, who's now bringing on somebody else from Teaneck, all are here. So the majority of the Chavura came because the senior Levi, became very good friends with the junior Levi and said, let's see if we can get some other people. So the majority of people who have been learning for the last 3 years are here in the of husband, your father, grandfather, and it's a great privilege for me to look at people and who are online and to know that that this all got started because this former well-known skier from the 20s felt it's very important to spend at least an hour a day learning Torah. So it's a big honor to continue this tradition, and we're sure that in Shemayim that we are being supervised by a very important individual, and should all realize. Last thing is that Irwin was never alone. Not only he was surrounded by a very warm and loving family, but particularly by a very wonderful, wonderful partner, who hopefully will continue all of the friendships that the two of them developed with people here in Florida and elsewhere. And we look forward to happy, healthy years together with her, smachot, with the family. And I'm honored to have his and to continue to be a friend of the Pasternak family.
Amen. Thank you, Amen. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Bell.
Yeah, I'd just like to say a few things.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think what hits me is in the Pirkei Avot. I believe it says Al Tifrosh Min HaTzibur. And my dad was, he's very in the community and never separate himself. And wherever he went, he was always part of the community and the shul. I think we talked about that in Bangor, and coming down to Hallandale, he always wanted to be part of the community, part of the shul, and part of something. And that's what really read for me, is being part of a group. Growing up, I heard all my stories with my mom. I was the youngest, so they couldn't get rid of me. But we heard all the stories Friday night. We had guests over all the time. And, it was very meaningful to see all the guests come and keep our, house open for Shabbat. Stuff, kind of shook a little bit today. Just a wonderful thing. It's wonderful ways they behaved and practiced, and they preached. They, walk the walk, talk the talk. So, and it was interesting growing up in a small town. You felt always jealous, and that press said that he likes the small town. He was the one that officiated the actual burial 3 days ago, and he says he loves the small towns because when you come from a small town, that's the community. It's all one and the same. We know each other. It's an extension of the family, the shul, support each other. And again, my always had, so whoever was needed a house and bought, and I came over, we got to know that. And I heard the stories, and I saw their kindness. So again, like all I can say is I can just see my dad as a role model, and just standing on his shoulders and just the best I can be. Continue his tradition. Yeah.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chaim. I'm sorry, maybe my internet cut off. If you were continuing, go ahead. Just I'm having.
No, I was just saying, just continue on his shoulders. I can stand on his shoulders and continue tradition of how my parents behaved, led the community, part of the community, and how they did everything together and partnered up, and just great role models.
Chaim, thank you, Ari. Thank you. By the way, because you have a, how do you call it, a legacy invitation to the Talmud Chabura. So if you ever want to join us, you don't have to go through the typical vetting process. Will allow you in with legacy access. All right, anyone else? I think my internet may be acting up. So if anyone else wants to, okay. If anyone else wants to chime in, if not, we'll learn a little Mishnah, and then there'll be more opportunity, I hope, if anyone else would like to share. And Ari, that was very meaningful, and yeah, your father and mother should be well. We're very special people. All right, so in the spirit of a Shloshim, we're going to study a little Mishnais. This is a Talmud Chabura, but for those who may not be familiar, the Talmud is necessarily based upon and structured upon the analysis and elaboration of the Mishnah. And so the Mishnah and the Gemara go hand in hand. What I want to do is I want to study 3 or 4 Mishnahs that are actually what we are in the middle of learning. And so Dr. Pasternak, when he was with us, was it 3 or maybe, no, I'm sorry, not 3, 5 weeks or so ago, or 6 weeks ago, would have already studied this Mishnah. So I thought it'd be appropriate to go back just a few Mishnahs, study it together. And it should, of course, all be a beautiful bracha for his neshama, and for those, for his loved ones, his family should be well and healthy and happy and successful and naches in every which way. So this is the 7th chapter. The 7th chapter of Pesachim, and soon we'll get into familiar territory. Tractate Pesachim, Rebero.
Yeah.
For tonight, what do you need?
Need to prepare some to do for the packages. Tomorrow I'm busy, usually do Wednesday.
All right, so Maseches Pesachim is a tractate that revolves all around the matters of the Passover holiday, and much of it, especially in the temple times, the central avodah, the central big event would have been the Paschal offering, the Karban Pesach. And Maseches Pesachim, throughout its chapters, in addition to talking about the purging of the chametz and the procurement of the matzah and the maror, we then talk at length in many chapters about the Karban Pesach. And it's finally in chapter 7 where we encounter some of the practical details of how the Paschal offering was actually prepared to be eaten. As we know, as the Chumash gives precise regulations about the manner of the preparation of this Paschal lamb. And so the Mishnah reads, Keitzad soilin esa Pesach. How would one roast the Karban Pesach? So we bring a spit made of pomegranate wood. Those who recall, the Gemara talks at length. Why not other options? And as you may recall, pomegranate wood is smooth, not smoky, and ideal for this purpose. The spit runs through the body of the animal, starting with the mouth and going out the other end. And then into the cavity, the parts that have to be removed to be cleaned, as well as the legs, are placed inside. This is how Rabbi Yossi Haglili prescribes the cooking of the Karban Pesach. Rabbi Kiva disagrees. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Kimin Bishul Huzeh, if you will place parts of the Karban Pesach into the cavity, it's effectively as if you're cooking it in a pot or in a dish, and that would not be direct roasting by fire. Rather, he says, these parts are suspended on the same spit as the Karban Pesach. So again, think back 2,000 years ago, Jewish people, this is what they were doing. The Mishnah continues, Ein soilin es ha-Pesach, loy ala shapud, loy ala askala. The Karban Pesach must not be placed on the typical spit, which is metal, loy ala askala, nor may it be placed on a grill. As you recall, those who study the Gemara, the issue is that it needs to be directly heated by fire. And if you're going to use metal implements that are touching the Karban Pesach, the metal that conducts the heat will thus cook the Karban Pesach in an unprescribed manner. Rabbi Tzadok tells a story of Rabbi Gamliel, where he indeed instructed his servant to say, go out, roast for us the Pesach al ha'askala, using this grill. Reb Menachem, did we say the modern Hebrew word would be mangal? Did we say that?
Yeah.
Except, of course, the Gemara notes that this doesn't mean a typical grill, rather some manner where it did not actually come into contact with the grill. What happens if you have a mishap and you're suspended on the spit, Karban Pesach inadvertently touches the wall of the hot oven, thus being cooked by the heated wall of the oven, Yikloif as Mekayme, that space that was singed or cooked or seared by the wall of the oven should be removed. It should be peeled. Notaf meroit ve'al acheres. If some of the gravy drips from the carbon pesach onto the earthen wall of the oven, the chazar love, and then it ends up being reapplied to the carbon pesach. Yitel as Mekayme, that space a little deeper than just the peeling should be removed. Notaf meroit ve'al asoiles. If some of this gravy drips into flour, yikmoitz as Mekayme, that whole space is removed. This Mishnah describing mishaps wherein parts of the carbon pesach are cooked or experience something that's outside of the prescribed manner, and therefore any of that gravy or juice or liquid or part of the carbon pesach that's cooked by any other form of heat is disqualified from the carbon pesach and must be eliminated. I want to remind and share that this Gemara launches us into an exhaustive discussion about the relationship of heat to other areas of Jewish eating, namely kashrus. Because as we know, in the laws of kosher, there are certain things that are permitted to be eaten and things that are not permitted to be eaten. And anytime a non-kosher item transfers flavor somehow, or somehow is through heat into the kosher item, it would then become, the kosher item then becomes unkosher. Or if milk and meat are both heated up and they come into contact, well, then there's the exchange of flavors, the milk into the meat into the milk, thus causing it to be unkosher. And so this Mishnah serves as a launchpad to exhaustive discussions about Jewish or halachic food sciences and the relationship of heat to flavor and so forth. The Mishnah continues, and maybe we'll do one or two more Mishnahs as part of our Shloshim study of Mishnayos. And then at some point we'll study a little bit of Gemara, which is an equally appropriate tribute to our dear Dr. Pasternak. Okay, the next Mishnah, Mishnah Gimel. Sachai b'shemen truma. What happens if you have a carbon pesach, which is to be eaten by any Jew who's signed up, but you use truma, which is an exclusive item to be eaten only by the kohen. If the people that are of this chabura are kohanim, well, then they use an absolutely kosher ingredient. So Yechelu, the kohen, could eat it without any concern. But if they're Israelites, there's a problem. Im Yisrael, they're absolutely not allowed to enjoy this oil. Im Chayhu, if the carbon is raw, Yidichenu, all they need to do is rinse it off. We do not suppose that any of this oil was absorbed into the carbon. Im Slihu, but if it is roasted, so either the meat is softened, or maybe it's hot, depending on how we interpret this Mishnah. Yikloif as achitza, you need to peel off the exterior layer. Sachai b'shemen shel ma'aser sheni, if the carbon was basted, was that the right word? What do we say? With oil that is ma'aser sheni, lo yaseno damim b'nei hachabura, there should be no charge, or you should not charge the value of this oil to the members of the chabura, shein poidin ma'aser sheni b'Yerushalayim, because it's inappropriate to exchange something that is of ma'aser sheni with currency in the city of Yerushalayim. All right, let's pause here. So these are a few Mishnahs in Mishnah Oisiyais Neshama, and it should be in Eloi Neshama. I want to use this opportunity to invite anyone else that wants to jump in as we find the Gemara, and we'll study now some Gemara in honor of Yisrael Moshe ben Shmuel Halevi. But again, because this is really meant to be an interactive conversation, not only the rabbis.
Rabbi, I can say.
Please, yes, thank you.
Okay. So I remember my dad always said that his earliest memories of Yahoo Judaism were going with his Zaidi to shul. And that was very moving for him. And later on in his life, when he and my mom made the decision to be religious, that was something that he clung on to, that memory. And I think it was just so fitting that his life became full circle. And he got to be a wonderful Zaidi to all our kids and his, and all his kids. But in addition, his life remained connected to shul. And he got to be, an elder in the shul here. And hearing everybody talk just and inspired by him. And I loved your words, how he was mechayev everybody. Is just so beautiful that he had that experience of life full circle, and that he got to be a Zaidi, got to be an elder in his shul, and so much a part of the learning, and that's just a special thing. And it just, really speaks to his greatness as a man and a man of Judaism.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And it's absolutely, absolutely true. And yeah. Anyone else before we share a line of Gemara? But if someone was listening, okay, I'll hold that joke to the unrecorded part. But sharing a line of Gemara, if you don't know what a Gemara is, could sound a little. All right, here, let's go. So back to our Gemara. And again, if anyone wants to chime in either about the subject of the Mishnah or the subject of the Gemara or the subject of our dear Dr. Pasternak and Mishpacha, this is a group dialogue, not a preacher. I'll just give you the orientation of what we're in the midst of. We're in the midst of a very shocking conversation, but it's going to end with us having some background on a very well-known kashrus issue. We are asking about the exchange of kosher flavor to something that is unkosher, or I should say the exchange of unkosher flavor to contaminate and to dekosher something that is kosher by virtue of fumes or scent or smell. Now, is Mark on today? No. Mark yesterday shared with us that the reason why, oh, you are, I'm sorry. I have limited view, so I have to scroll through. For some reason, you were out of my range of vision. So Mark yesterday shared with us that the reason why something smells is because there are certain molecules from the substance that are in the air creating the aroma. And so today, I think we would understand that aroma is, in a certain way, substance. But conversely, we'll agree, Mark, and you'll unmute yourself and tell me if you disagree, that the concentration of molecules, let's say, that is aroma is considerably less than the concentration of molecules if you're actually dealing with substance. Will you agree with
the molecules the molecules would be batal b'shishim, I think.
Oh, so it's nominal molecules. But the question is, and Mark, the reason why we don't immediately default to batal b'shishim is because although on one hand maybe it's invisible, but on the other hand, there may actually be a real impact. So for what I'm calling halachic food sciences, we're debating now, there's a debate about how we consider smell or fumes, or in the language of the Gemara, reyach. And so this becomes an issue if one is to roast two dishes, a kosher dish and an unkosher dish in the same oven. We understand that if you cook something in the same oven, there are going to be fumes and aroma that may or may not be conveyed from one to the other. And so to all of us, it was most obvious that it should be unacceptable to cook a kosher item and an unkosher item in the same oven. That was very, very evident to everyone on the chabad. However, what emerges from our Gemara, and then the many different the methods of interpreting the Gemara in the halachists, it's not entirely simple that one is never permitted to cook two items in the same oven. I know it sounds shocking. And halacha l'maisa, we should never put God forbid, what's a good example? You should never put your brisket in the oven alongside a pork roast, or God forbid, or something like that. Never, that's never okay. But it could be that there are hypothetical situations where it would not be.
They would be, the more common case they would be, whether it was inflections or something in whether part actually probably you need a cake time with the cake part still. That would be real application today. I don't think you say anybody's going to put trafe in the oven at the same time with their.
So I'm sorry, my sound is a little shaky. What were you saying?
Saying basically today would be the more common thing, whether you have milks and fleishiks, or even more common is if you have a cake in the oven while you're making.
Okay. Yes. So our Gemara is actually going to get
a real time application today.
So the Gemara is actually going to, I don't know if we'll get to it today, but the Gemara is actually going to wade into the discussion of fleshig pariv food, or pariv food cooked in a fleshig oven. And that's something that people are quite both familiar with and confused about, because it's a little bit ambiguous. Is it fleshigs or is it pariv? And if it's pariv, how can you put any restrictions? And so our Gemara will end up in that territory. And that's definitely a much more relatable issue than, God forbid, a brisket cooked alongside a pork roaster or whatever you call it. So let's see the teachings of Levi in the Gemara. And again, our learning today, the whole introduction was a Shloshim, but we didn't do it in our typical formula. But of course, we're learning today to honor the neshama of our dear Dr. Pasternak, Yisrael Moshe ben Shmuel Levi, and in prayerful wishes for good news from Eretz Yisrael, for all our brothers and sisters, those that are fighting bravely with great sacrifice to protect the land of Israel and the people of Israel, and those who need a refuah. And unfortunately, too many of our chayalim who need healing, refuah nefesh, refuah guf. It should be speedily and complete. And of course, all the residents of Eretz Yisrael as well, for safety, peace of mind, and all the news that all the good news that we daven for. All right. So now we're going to see. So we have Rav, who says that if you cook two kinds of meat together, fat, lead, there's an exchange of flavor and it's no good. And Levi says, and again, this is what blew our minds, even if you have a very lean kosher meat, that's roasted or cooked alongside fatty, unkosher meat. Mutter, the kosher meat remains kosher, remains mutter. My time on this is the punchline. Why would it be okay? Gemara says, Reicha ba'almahu. We are not talking about where they were negeya. They didn't have an actual exchange of flavor. They were not mixed together. All that happens is a little reyach, a little scent or aroma, which is not substance. You can't get full on aroma. Right, Mark? You'll agree to that. It might make you more hungry, but you'll never become full on aroma.
Yeah, it definitely will make you more hungry.
Right, exactly. The reich alav milsahi. We do not view reach, aroma, scent, fumes to be substantive. And Levi is so confident in his psak, in his perspective, that Ovid Levi uvda bei reish gelusa b'gdiva davar acher. A Levi even practically permitted an instance where you had the gedi, a goat, cooked alongside a davar acher, cooked alongside a chazir. Which means he didn't just say it for kicks or as an intellectual claim, but he actually paskined that it would be acceptable should one have cooked. Now, the halachis, the Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam, the commentaries, the Rif, the Rosh, they all get very much, and the other Rishonim get very much into the nitty-gritty of what really was the situation here. And is it something that you're allowed to do lichatchila, meaning can you use an oven that has in it a chazir, or was this only b'diavad? In the event where it already happened, is it considered in retrospect or retroactively kosher? But that's the story. Now the Gemara is going to tell us how this ever arrived on Pesachim's pages, because we have an apparent analog, we have an apparent commonality with the discussion of Korban Pesach, which is why this was introduced. Here we go. A challenge from our Pesachim. Ein soilin shnei Pesachim ka'echad. The halacha is, the Brisa tells us, one is not allowed to cook two Korban Pesachs alongside one another. Rashi, well, no. Why not? The Brisa continues, Mipnei hata'aroves. We don't want a commingling, a mixing. And Rashi says, what would happen if it mixes? V'nimsa Pesach. No, I'm sorry. Rashi's already talking about the next step. Okay. So it sounds like what we're talking about here is that the flavor of one Korban Pesach is infused into the other. What's the problem? A carbon Pesach may only be eaten by its registered members. If some of the flavor of my carbon Pesach or our carbon Pesach goes into another person's carbon Pesach, they are effectively maybe eating the wrong carbon Pesach. And so this is the Gemara's initial reason. My lav, what's the reason this is prohibited? Surely, taroives talmim. The issue is the commingling of flavor, which is how I explained it. The Kashi Levi, and Levi is the one who says that he does not believe that flavor can be exchanged, that aroma can be exchanged. And here we have a brisa that says aroma is a real issue. The Gemara says, no, loy. The concern here is you may actually inadvertently mix up your carbon. And so each group is taking home the carbon of their friend, and everybody is eating an unkosher, unauthorized carbon Pesach. That would be an absolute Paschal crisis. Rashi?
Rabbi,
Yes.
how does this relate to the temporary issue of having some products that are kosher with taste of treif? So many ethnic restaurants that advertise tastes like real Chinese food, tastes like real ch7 or whatever, and it's under hashgacha of not whoever the hashgacha. Is that an issue? It's not the aroma, it's not the smell. It's commingling products that have been made to taste the pastrami with the taste of bacon, whatever you want.
Right.
Okay, is there an issue there?
So you're asking a very interesting and important question. When we say that flavor is unkosher, it only means the actual flavor of a truly unkosher food. I'll explain to you, Dr. Hammer, why this is so. Because here we're talking about a pastrami that's from a kosher pastrami, which means it was shechted, and unkosher pastrami, which means it was not shechted. They taste identical. If you do a blind taste test, you'll not know which one is kosher and which is not kosher, assuming they're prepared in the exact same manner. So the issue isn't something that tastes like a non-kosher food. The issue is if it in fact is unkosher, any flavor from that unkosher dish is asur, is prohibited. And if it would be infused into a kosher dish, so this is much more of a technical issue than what our palate perceives. I hope I explain that. So basically, the issue, Tom, is in fact flavor of a non-kosher food.
Rabbi,
Yes, Rabbi.
if things are complicated, wait till we deal with lab-created meat and all that stuff.
So I was actually debating if I should bring it up, although I didn't have a very good, insightful next step. Today, it gets very complicated because today, and Dr. Hammer, I imagine this was going to probably follow. Today, you can take, God forbid, a piece of chazer into a lab, break it down on the molecular level, and then create in a laboratory a food that tastes precisely like chazer, down to the texture and flavor, because today we can isolate all of them, or I don't know, but we can isolate enough of the flavor and the texture to really recreate. And that's not even talking about lab grown stuff. Here we're talking about replicating the flavor down to the precise flavor. So that's a question. For the record, if they're using, let's say, non-animal byproducts in a lab to produce this food, it shouldn't really be, in fact, unkosher. That doesn't mean there aren't halachas about food that tastes identical to unkosher food. There are certain halachas about marasayin, perhaps, or at least appropriate labels to make sure that people realize that it's kosher. But that's definitely a fascinating question. A question that we can't really imagine was on the minds of the rabbis in the time of the Gemara, but today with scientific advance is absolutely a reality that is considered. Now, before we continue, there was a controversy about a potato chip. We discussed this here a few years ago. That is a pork rind flavored potato chip. That is you got a hashgacha. It was kosher because whatever made the pork rind flavor was not actually pork rinds. So there was a whole debate how the OU, I think it was the OU, could give hashgacha on such an item when they have a policy against giving other foods that maybe sound or are blatantly
On that
unkosher.
impossible pork, they wouldn't do it.
Right.
You wouldn't give them, even though it actually was kosher.
So how do
By the
they?
way,
Yes.
if we could measure, talking about aromas, if we could measure, if it's ever possible to be measured, would the law of 1/60th apply?
Do you mean if the flavor from based on aroma is infused into the other item?
Yeah,
That's an interesting question. Meaning, Levi says we don't even need to go there. The rule of batel b'shishim, the rule of bittul, is only when there was ever an issue. But according to Levi, there's never any issue because there's no substance of unkosher. But according to Rav, who apparently is concerned by this, that's a very good question. I don't know.
I know batel b'shishim doesn't apply if the usher thing imparts flavor on the kosher thing. Part. If
Right.
it actually imparts a flavor and you can taste it from the non-kosher, then I think you can batel.
By the way, there is discussion. It's not an argument, I don't believe, but there is discussion when we talk about the laws of kosher about a test taster. Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. 1 second.
Yeah, often they say you would get a guy to taste it, and if he could taste it, taste the non-kosher.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna send something out to you. Thank you. Beryl, can I ask you a very big favor?
yeah.
Can you open the kitchen? There's a delivery for Shalom Bear from Bethlehem. I'm sorry. Again?
I know, and I forgot where I was seeing it. So it may have been in the Rambam or somewhere there. It says if you would have a guy taste it,
Yes.
and if he could taste the tray flavor or whatever, then it was no good.
If his credibility is on the record and it's not, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Let's go back to Pesachim just for a moment. You can't cook 2 carbon Pesachs. Initially, we thought the issue was the exchange of flavor. And Levi here is a flavor denier. So how does he square this away? So Levi will say simple. Not only is Levi a flavor denier, the halacha is not interested in flavor, but you can actually mix up the 2 carbons. The Gemara says, Hachinami mistabra. This indeed appears to be pshat. This appears to be the interpretation. You know why? The Tani Seifa, look at the next line in the Brisa. It says you can't cook 2 items together. Afilu gdi v'tle. Even a goat and a lamb, or a kid and a lamb, I'm sorry. They won't get mixed up. They look different. Oh, I'm sorry. No. The Mishnah says you even can't cook together gdi and tle. If the main issue is mixing of the bodies, now you understand why it says, really, you can't cook 2 at the same time. But we'll even extend it to a gdintla. If the issue lechatchila is the flavor exchange, why do we even need to mention a chiddush that we don't want you to put together 2 different kinds of animals? There is no difference. It's all about the flavor. Therefore, Levi says, I read the Mishnah that the main issue is that you'll mix the 2 items up, but in order to prevent that from happening, we don't even want you putting together 2 different animals. The issue is mixing up the 2 carbonis, but the flavor exchange, shari is no prohibition, no problem. And maybe this is a knockout punch to Rav's proposal that we're afraid of flavor exchange. Rav Yirmiyah says no. Here, the concern is they're actually roasted in 2 different pots. Now, I know what you're going to ask me. I thought you're not allowed to cook a carbon Pesach in a pot. So we're going to have to explore that in a moment. But it's going to be in a situation where the flavor cannot be exchanged. Even then, it's still prohibited. So the Gemara says, how could you ever cook a carbon Pesach in a pot? You're not allowed to do that. It has to be on a spit over fire. Rather, our brisa here, which says that you can't cook them together lest they become mixed up, is talking about a situation that, let's see. Ein soilen shnei pesachim ge'achad b'tarevus. You can't cook two carbon pesachs together because they'll be mixed. My tarevus time. The issue is a flavor exchange. Even if they are similar to two spits. I'm sorry, two pots. As if Rashi says, there's something blocking the oven in two. So if the oven is divided down the middle, so they're really given their own separate place. It's almost as if they're in two separate pots. We still don't allow it. The Leika Tarevis time, in a case where we can be certain there will be no flavor exchange, it's still also because you still might mix up the two carbonis. Also, Mishum Tarevis. So again, let me just explain to you. We found the brisa that sounds more intuitively to be reading as a rejection of flavor exchange, supporting the opinion of Levi. But Rav would say, no, we are concerned about a flavor exchange, but even if we could set up our oven in a manner that never allows the possibility of I shouldn't say flavor exchange, I should say aroma exchange. It doesn't allow the wafting aroma of one to the other. There's still an additional concern, which is you may actually mix up the two carbonis.
Right.
Yes, Rabbi.
On a practical basis, if you would have two groups and the large, could they not somehow say that we're going to do two lambs and consider that required for the amount of people between the two groups?
Although we have not explicitly explored that option, it's clear that that would not be an acceptable scenario. Meaning, it would be nice to say, okay, this restaurant, Brazil, Kasha de Brazil, says everyone come to our place for carbon Pesach. We have 10 carbon Pesachs, and everybody is all for one and one for all. We're all part of all these 10 chaburs. It doesn't work. You have to be specifically on a specific carbon Pesach. And of course, it has to do it because when the carbon Pesach is brought, it needs to be brought specifically for one set of groups. And you can't be manoi, you can't be assigned to two different chaburas. So it would be a nice solution, but unfortunately, in fact, that is not an acceptable option. Rav Mari Ketanoi. Rav Mari proposes that maybe the debate between Rav and Rav and Levi, the question of if aroma recha milsahi, perhaps this is not a debate in the era, in the realm, in the dialogue of the Gemara. Maybe this has roots in a Mishnaic debate, a debate between Tanoim. Where might we find that? Okay, we're talking about if a person places hot bread on top of a barrel of wine. There's a discussion if we suppose that the bread absorbs something from the wine. The person takes bread from the oven and places it on a barrel of truma. Rabbi Meir says it is asur. And Rashi right away says, we don't mean asur. A kohen should be able to eat it. Oiser lazorim, a non-kohen should not be able to eat it. We assume the bread has a little bit of flavor of truma. Yehuda mater, Rabbi Yehuda says it's okay. Rabbi Yossi mater b'shal chitin v'oiser b'shal sorim. So we have three opinions. Rabbi Meir says no good. Rabbi Yehuda says it's absolutely kosher, absolutely okay. And Rabbi Yossi says not all breads are created equal. Wheat bread does not absorb, it's not so absorbent, and barley bread is very absorbent. My lav tanaihi. Surely this is the essence of the debate. The mar savar recha lab milsahi. Mar savar. Did I say? What did I just say? Sarim was. Did I misspeak? Okay. Anyways, my lav tanaihi. The mar savar recha lab milsahi. Mar savar recha milsahi. Maybe the debate is the significance of aroma, of reach, of fumes. Slimar says, you know what? Lil Levi vadai tanaihi. Levi, who says there's no issue of aroma, would have to concede that there are opinions that don't permit aroma, that say aroma is a problem. He would have to see himself as one opinion in a Tanaic debate. But the question is, does Rav think there's room in the Mishnah for Levi's opinion? Or does Rav say that all the Mishnah is all an expression of his viewpoint? The Rav Nema Tanaihi, does Rav see a debate? Gemara says, Rav could reject this Mishnah giving a voice to Levi. The Kuli Alma Milsa, the Kuli Alma Recha Milsa. Rav says everybody agrees that aroma is an issue, and therefore you can't cook chazer alongside kosher.
Rabbi, why do all these things come up?
What do you mean?
You know, we're talking about Jewish people. We're not talking a mixture of Protestants and Jews. Why should chazer even be introduced into the house?
I'll tell you what I think the answer is, because we're talking about Jewish people living in a real world. And a real world, there's many opportunities to slip up, to mess up. It's not a world that there is no chazer. It's not a world that there is no mistakes. And therefore the Torah, the Torah was not given to angels. It was given to humans. And therefore the Gemara gives a lot of careful consideration to hypotheticals that are either probable or possible, so that we will be prepared to respond to real life mishaps in a real world. Okay, fine. But you didn't open the kitchen. Shalom will be here soon, it's fine. Thank you, Rebel. So anyway, so that's that. So let me give a fast recap, and I think we'll wind down to allow any final comments. And also, I don't know if my internet's acting up. I don't see anybody, so you'll have to tell me if you're. Long story short, we introduced a discussion about exchange of aroma from two items being cooked alongside each other. It seems like a mystery or a riddle how it may have to pertain to the Karban Pesach. But we introduced a brisa that talks about the prohibition of cooking two Karban Pesachs, one next to the other, seemingly weighing in on the issue of reach, if aroma could prohibit a otherwise kosher item. And we find out that Rav and Shmuel perhaps would paskin differently in the situation of, would have to read the brisa differently depending on how they understand the matter of Karban Pesach. Levi, not Rav and Shmuel, Rav and Levi. Levi would be compelled to say that the brisa is not talking about a mix-up of flavor, it's talking about a mix-up of gufot, the actual karban. Rav would say no. We are concerned about a flavor exchange, but even in a case where we could somehow avoid a flavor exchange, there is also a concern of the commingling of the actual karbanis. We then brought a case of bread on top of a barrel, a machlokes in the Mishnah, if it's prohibited or not. Does it weigh in on the subject of reach milsa or lav milsa? Depends who you ask. Levi would have to concede that his viewpoint, as well as Rav's, are represented in that brisa, this discussion about the bread. Whereas Rav can make the case that it is purely talking about a situation where everybody is concerned about flavor. And the reason why at the barrel and the bread discussion there's a debate is because it depends on the variables of that case, which we'll analyze tomorrow. So I want to close out the formal learning part. Once again, saying what an honor and a privilege it is that today could be honoring the Shloshim of our dear friend. I guess the more appropriate thing would be to say that it is an honor and a privilege to have Dr. Pasternak as one of our founding members of the Zoom Daily Talmud Chabura. His neshama should have an aliyah. His family should be blessed vastly and beautifully in every which way. And he will forever be part of the DNA, part of the character, part of the nature of our Gemara Chabura. May his memory be a bracha, a blessing. And again, his family should be blessed with nachas, health, happiness, success,
Amen.
And all good brachas. And thank you to those that are joining us and those that held on till the end. A privilege, honor that you're here. Thank you so much. And we'll now open the mic. We'll open the floor again for closing comments. Just to remind everyone that at 10:30 I have a Tanakh discussion, the book of Daniel. So anyways, L'chaim, thank you. And we shall only have good news to share.
Amen.
Amen.
May we only have simchas.
Amen. Thank you, Rebbe.
Thank you.
All right.